Welcome to Progress in San Diego, Ordinary People Doing Extraordinary Things. I'm your host, Walter Davis. And with me this evening, I have the pleasure of having Leo Lawrence, who is a member of Law Enforcement Against Prohibition, which is abbreviated LEAP, L-E-A-P. Welcome to the show, sir.
Pleasure.
Well, this is a wonderful organization that I've had the pleasure to meet a lot of the international officers. I met people from Scotland Yard and from all over the world. So this is essentially a organization of current and retired people, if I'm correct, that are involved, that have been involved with law enforcement. But there are police officers, sheriffs, district attorneys, people of that nature that are against the prohibition of drugs. Is that correct?
Yes.
Could you elaborate?
Although anyone can be a member for the Speakers Bureau, of which I'm a part, you have to either be a former or current law enforcement officer. And you have to have worn a badge.
Okay.
There's a different perspective on life when you're wearing a badge. You look at the world a little differently.
Right.
And even I was walking down the street and saw a person about in their mid-30s hunched over the driver's side door of a car. And I thought, when you go to get in your car, you stick your hand out. You're not hunched over. And it just didn't fit. And I stopped and watched him. He was trying to break in. He saw me, ran. I phoned it in. And within 2 minutes, San Diego PD picked him up. Third strike. But he just, when I walked by, it just didn't look right. And a law enforcement officer trained to notice when things just don't look right and respond.
So tell me about your law enforcement background.
Well, I'm a former deputy sheriff out of Missouri, and my headquarters boss, the international office, is a former major of the Maryland State Police. We have over 50,000 members in 81 countries, and we just picked up one in Brazil and in Canada.
Wow.
So we're literally all over the world.
Right.
We have a more expansive mission than the medical marijuana community. We believe that if you tax, regulate, and control all drugs, like Portugal does very successfully, then crime goes down. And currently, all three of the federal prosecutors in California are on a big mission to shut down all the medical marijuana dispensaries because it's against federal law, but not state law. And the only people who are happy about that are the Mexican drug cartels. People are going to get their medical marijuana medicine. And if they have to go on the street, that's where they'll get it. And if the federal government and the federal prosecutors in California are successful, Mexican drug cartels are going to be really happy.
So people may find that very curious that a current or former law enforcement officer would say, legalize the drugs that are now classified as illegal. Can you, and we saw this right in the 1920s, 30s time frame when we had prohibition of alcohol.
Same thing, yes. If you prohibit something, like alcohol then, I mean, marijuana by the pound is more valuable than gold. It's more valuable than uranium.
Wow.
Yes. $16 billion industry in California alone. And if you taxed that $16 billion, how many schools can we reopen? How many thousand teachers can maybe knock out the budget?
The budget deficit.
That's right.
And pave some of the roads and keep the fire departments open.
Exactly.
But
right now, with their fight to close dispensaries, patients will get their product one way or another. If they have to go on the street, they will. If they go on the street, that helps the cartels.
And this is really insane because it's been proven that marijuana is very effective in
Yes.
terms of treating various ailments, is it not?
Oh, yes. There are 3 former Army infantry combat soldiers. All 3 have PTSD. They live in Mission Beach. The VA put them on psychotic antidepressant drugs, and that was worse than the symptoms. Then these 3 veterans, one who has 2 Purple Hearts, found out about marijuana. They used that, and they could get rid of all the drugs. Now, if they close down all dispensaries, which the federal prosecutors would like to do, those veterans are going to have to go on the street.
That's really, it's really insane. I mean, I just find this very hard to understand. And once again, as we talked about, there are law enforcement officers all over the world that share this very same opinion.
Oh, yes.
You got people in Brazil, you got people in England, you got people in Scotland, people, you got a whole list of people here from all over the world. Australia, what else? Vancouver, Canada, Tucson, Arizona. I mean, there are officials all over the world that are saying the same thing that you are.
Now, law enforcement is like a triangle. And up on top is the boss, the chief, the sheriff. Now, in San Diego, our police chief, William Lansdowne, openly supports medical marijuana. And all his troops know that. So that means the cop on the beat or the detectives working cases are going to realize, okay, the chief has a different position than what the sheriff and the U.S. attorneys are doing. But what bothers me a bit is I go to meetings, community meetings, all over Southern California, and there is beginning to be a lot of anti-law enforcement sentiment in the cannabis community. And that's really unfortunate. Part of it is probably because there are so many raids, but I tell people, if you have a contact with any law enforcement officer, respect the badge. The officer may be doing things unlawfully or unprofessionally, but there's ways to administratively take care of that. When you have a contact with law enforcement, respect that badge. And if they're doing something they shouldn't be doing, make sure you get the number and phone it in.
Right. There is a hotline for that.
Yes. But the amount of money that could be obtained if, and I'm speaking now not just of marijuana, all drugs. You regulate, you control it, and you tax it.
Now, beyond that, how much of a tax savings would it be to relieve these peace officers from the responsibility of having to go and bust all these people for drugs?
The war on drugs is a money-making venture. And many times they are opposed to dispensaries and medical marijuana because they don't want to lose all the federal monies and all the money. The war on drugs is a lot of money. A lot of money.
Now,
and the governments, chiefs, sheriffs, they don't want to lose that money. However, if they supported it, they would find crime goes down. Wherever a medical marijuana shop goes in a neighborhood, providing they're 600 feet from schools and like that, but whenever and we have a lot of statistics at our international office in Massachusetts, but worldwide, whenever they legalized the product, taxed it, and then controlled it, that will bring in billions of dollars.
So we're talking about bringing in billions of dollars in taxes, but also saving billions of dollars in terms of money being spent to fight the crime and lowering the crime level. So this really seems to make a lot of sense that we would do this as a civilized people.
I'm not sure that in all of our politics we have much civilized people there.
However, the American people, I believe, are in general good at heart. However, we've been miseducated, and people have been
Yes.
misled into believing that these policies are good. And my understanding is that at this point, every 38 seconds, an American citizen is arrested on
Correct.
some type of drug charge. So our prison population is increasing by, what, 10,000 people a month? And we have the highest incarceration level in the world right now.
And there's a lot of prisoners, for example, at the Donovan State Prison in southern San Diego County. There are a lot of prisoners on there because of one joint. Third strike, you got a joint on you, you're going. And it costs a lot of money to keep a prisoner behind the bars.
And so our prisons are actually overcrowded. They don't have enough room for all the prisoners. We're spending a great deal of money. I've seen figures that estimate between $50,000 and $80,000 a year, depending, to house a person in prison for
That's
1
right.
year. And so with, what was it, 1.1 million Americans incarcerated now, or is it more than that?
We now have a higher percentage of persons incarcerated than any country in the world.
Exactly, according to the Pew report. And so this seems to be very incongruent with this supposedly being a land of the free, etc. That seems to be very incongruent with that idea.
I don't agree. I still think we're the land of the free.
Okay.
And I still think we have a high respect for law and order in this country. I think that people, for example, when the power went out and all over there was no power, people were going out on the street and being nice to each other.
Sure.
And I think that basically they are. But some issues get politicized. On that triangle, the people on the top are like the sheriff or the police chief, but above them is the DA. And in San Diego, we've got a DA trying to use medical marijuana enforcement to become mayor.
Exactly.
But the conflict between the fact that in California it's lawful to use medical marijuana, but it's against federal law, that brings into play what we call states' rights. And generally, the Constitution says that the penal code and all is going to be, that's a states' rights issue. But the U.S. attorneys are political people.
Right.
And their current crackdown was mobilized by the U.S. attorneys in the South, Central, and Northern California, approved by the Department of Justice in Washington and the White House in an election year. And they're trying to use marijuana to get people elected. And the sad part is how much of that is being done. If they would use the truth, like crime goes down significantly, not up, when you have a medical marijuana dispensary in the neighborhood. Some will say, well, it's the beginning of using bigger drugs. If you start out with medical marijuana, you're going to be on heroin soon. No, alcohol. And after the alcohol kick doesn't help, they go to heroin, but not marijuana. It is not addictive. Kids are not trying to go to dispensaries, and the security operation in dispensaries is really tough.
Yes.
The quality, there's even a lab that many of the San Diego dispensaries use, that they send a little bit of their product to this lab, and in 24 hours they have whether it's good quality or what. But if people have to get their medicine on the street, they have no idea what it is. In dispensaries, there is quality control.
So once again, when we're talking about things like cocaine, if some of these things were distributed in a pharmaceutical grade environment,
Yeah.
where it was regulated, where you get the tax, but then
Right.
there's also a safety issue. How much tax money is spent on helping people go to the hospital when they get some impure drugs mixed
Right.
up with God knows what?
Right.
So again, this seems to be really a sensible position to take if you view the facts correctly. It doesn't appear as though that information is being dispensed to the American people.
True. And when I've been a speaker for LEAP for a long time. When I go around making speeches, I am surprised that I have everything from teenagers to seniors come up and say, thank you for bringing law enforcement, the prestige of law enforcement, into the medical marijuana campaign. And they're just so grateful that we're doing it. And it shows that law enforcement officers are not the enemy. The first person, if you're having trouble, you're being invaded or somebody's breaking into your home, you dial 911, you have a law enforcement officer respond. Our law enforcement officers are professional people, and that's federal, state, and national. And it's amazing how many active duty officers will come up if I'm at an event and they'll be in civvies and they'll introduce themselves and say, let me give you a call and maybe you can help out. And it happens. The law enforcement officers who want to get involved can do it anonymously. But we do have quite a few, well, like I say, we've got over 50,000 members in 81 countries. It's a big organization.
Wow. So we're down to our last 10 minutes, and I want to make sure that you cover the most important items on this, the list that you so graciously provided me. Could you go ahead and elaborate on some of the things that you find very important to talk about during this interview?
Well, for people not to listen to all of the lies, and when in the last campaign, our local district attorney, Bonnie Dumanis, published a statement in the Union Tribune newspaper, and I went through it, and 7 of her 8 points were factually incorrect. When I was in the DA's office, we had great respect for the DA. He would never do something and put facts out in public which weren't iron and exactly correct.
Exactly.
Unfortunately, our current DA is doing just that. And we are down. We had over 220 dispensaries at one time in the San Diego City.
Right.
We're down now to about 40. And they're having the same problem in the San Francisco Bay Area. The feds up there, what they're doing is a novel legal theory. They are going after landlords and saying to the landlord, we are going to take your property if you don't kick out the dispensary. The dispensary is committing a federal crime. Your building is being used for that federal crime. Therefore, we're going to take it.
And this is even after the people of California have voted in favor.
In favor, yes.
Okay.
It's legal in state law, unlawful under federal law, and there have been some challenges, but it takes so long to get a challenge through the courts. But it's, I think, important that we realize that there are people from teenagers to seniors who appreciate the fact that there's a law enforcement organization actively involved in the medical marijuana field.
And not only that, the entire concept of prohibition.
Oh, yes. If you want to make something valuable, prohibit it.
So we saw what happened with Al Capone. I mean, the big thing there was the prohibition of alcohol.
Right.
And that didn't work.
That didn't.
This is not working either. We're having hundreds of children and young people killed in Chicago on the streets, in New York, in Philadelphia, New Orleans is a cesspool of crime right now. And all over the country, even in the small towns now, we have people being victimized by the drug industry, the underground drug industry,
yes.
in one form or
Yes.
another. Our insurance rates are going up because of these things. Our tax dollars are being wasted on warehousing people. And one of the most atrocious parts of this is this conspiracy law, where people's grandmothers and aunts and mothers are being put in jail simply because they answered the phone innocuously and said, he said the package is ready for you to come and get. And they didn't even know what the package was. And
Yeah.
so they are being put in prison for 15 years. And because of the minimum sentencing guidelines, a lot of the hands of the judges are being tied. And the nonsensical approach of this schedule thing was we have Schedule 1, Schedule 2, and Schedule 3 drugs. Whereas tobacco is killing 400,000 people in this country every year, yet it's legal.
Tobacco is a killer. Absolutely a killer. Marijuana is not and never has been. It doesn't lead to heavier drugs. And if we can get through the states' rights issue and get the feds to go after federal crimes instead of trying to battle state issues, then we'll have a revolution, a cultural revolution.
What do you see as some of the solutions to these problems? What is your call to action, excuse me, to the American people?
Doing shows like this. The main mission of LEAP is educational. Filing lawsuits and like that, we have very good activist organizations that do things like that. But our main mission is to educate the public about the truth of medical marijuana. And it's just amazing that there are so many people who are really interested in it. And it's not just a bunch of hippies. The owner of one dispensary told me, oh, easily over half of our business is senior citizens. They're the ones who are using it. And they report all kinds of ailments are treated successfully with medical marijuana.
So tell me about some of those ailments. I know cancer is one, right?
Pain especially.
Pain, okay.
I had recently, for 2 months, was knocked out because I had sciatica pain of my left leg. The pain was just horrible. I had one night had to go into a hospital to get some shots. And then one doctor said, if you can get and use some marijuana, it'll take a lot of the pain away. So people have problems with lower back pain and things like that. Medical marijuana is extremely effective. But with heavy things like PTSD from our veterans, combat veterans, saying that the psychotic stuff that they were giving us in pills was worse than symptoms. And now they just smoke a little in the morning and they can get through. They don't have to relive their experiences of combat.
So over and over again, there are statistics that prove that what you're saying is correct.
Yes.
And the call to action would be to do shows like this, to learn more about law enforcement against prohibition, to really research on your own and find out what the facts are, as opposed to the things that we're being fed by major media outlets and some of the people running for political offices. There's a plethora of information available on the internet in terms of what the real background is for the medical marijuana issues and the prohibition issues regarding other drugs. We're down to our last 3 minutes. Do you have a closing statement for the interview, sir?
Yes, like anyone to contact you if they want an appearance before their group. And quite frankly, I've found the most interesting people to discuss this with are conservative groups. Because when you look at it, medical marijuana is a very private thing. This is something you do in the privacy of your home. It's a very conservative issue.
Okay.
And the people who are fighting this are federal prosecutors, and it got approved by the Department of Justice and the White House, unfortunately.
Well, I want to thank you very much for joining us. I appreciate the information that you brought forward. And again, I want to encourage you as American citizens, as people watching this, to get involved, to learn what the facts are surrounding the drug laws that we have. They're damaging to the American people. They're damaging to our society. And we could have a much better society if, in fact, we didn't pick and choose what drugs were going to be legal and which ones were going to be illegal, because it appears that the drugs that are the most damaging are the ones that are illegal. We have illegal alcohol, we have legal nicotine and tobacco, and those are causing the deaths of hundreds of thousands of people, yet we have millions of people incarcerated as a result of the drug laws. Thank you once again for joining us on Progress in San Diego. I'm your host, Walter Davis.